Okay, welcome everybody. My name is Greg Sterling. I'm a VP of Strategy and Insights for the Local Search Association. I'm joined today by Neil Polachek, who's a board advisor for Hello, Neil. BuzzBoard and a longtime analyst, thinker in the local space. And we're here today to go over what we think is going to happen in 2016 across a number of different topics and discussion areas. And it's not just us. In fact, the LSA solicited predictions input from members and people on our list. And we got a lot of great feedback. And some of that is reflected here today. Some of it I've added to or modified, and Neil and I have injected our own ideas in here. So this is an amalgam of stuff that we're going to be talking about. We want to invite you to be part of the conversation. So we don't want this to be a typical webinar where people just sort of listen passively with one ear and do email, and then at the end there's a couple of questions. If you guys have questions or dispute what we're saying or think we're missing something, throw those in to the question box during the appropriate time, and we'll integrate those. I'll read those and integrate those into our discussion. 48 hours from now, the webinar will be available for replay. You'll get an email which will have our contact information. If you have any questions, you can follow up at that time. This is the URL where you can get access to it. Also, that'll be in the email. So we have a little bit of a fun game today for folks. So of course, I'm there on the right against a gray background, but Neil is standing in front of a beautiful, bucolic scene somewhere in the world. For the person or persons, plural, who gets where that photograph was taken, they'll get a combination of LSA and BuzzBoard swag featuring the fabulous, massive capacity LSA mug.
And we'll be sending along a lovely BuzzBoard like moleskin notebook that everybody seems to carry around in all the tech companies today. It's very nice. Exactly. It's green. You'll always find it on your desk. You won't miss it. So where do you think that is, exactly, everybody? Greg,
right. So your feel. Go ahead.
I was just wondering. You know, we're waiting to see anybody respond to the where in the world was I that day, and the first person, as Greg said, who types in the right answer in the I think it's in the question box, right?
Yeah.
Greg. Yeah, we'll send a nice gift home. So.
Right.
We'll need your physical address. That's all.
Right. So we're not gonna announce the winner till the end. So take a last look. We'll give you a couple. We'll play the Jeopardy music as you take a final look. Yes. Right. That's right. Okay. We're a little more relaxed because it's the end of the year here. So take your last look and then. Okay, I'm seeing the guesses come in. Incorrect. All of them are incorrect so far, although one of them is sort of closer than the others. But they are all incorrect guesses to date, or so far. Okay, I'm going to move on. Maybe at the end I'll give people a last shot at this picture. So as I said, these predictions are drawn from multiple sources, our own brains and those of many local marketing experts, LSA members, and others. Please feel free to inject your comments and questions, your disagreements, your alternative visions of the world into that question box as we talk about them. So the first prediction is that consumers and consumer behavior will continue, primarily driven by mobile adoption and mobile-related behaviors. Consumer behavior will continue to outpace small business and brand capacity to meet it. But Neil, any thoughts there?
Well, I totally agree. I think some of the consumer tech companies, think about Uber and Airbnb, they're really defining that experience. But a lot of the more traditional brands aren't. You know, they were built in a bricks and mortar world, and now they're trying to get into this digital world and be part of it. And you know, I did this refi with a bank recently, and they've got some new software that tracks your progress of your refi, and it was so complicated. And it's that kind of thinking, I think your screen just changed, Greg, that I think really has to be pushed into the traditional line companies in order to keep up with the expectations of the rapidly sort of advancing consumer market.
Yes, that was me plugging my phone back in and the iTunes icon coming back up. So
yes.
Sorry about that.
So I think it is.
Well, yeah. I mean, I would say that we continue to see consumer survey data that shows consumers want personalization. Consumers are sort of interested in mobile payments and online booking and all these things. And it's kind of amazing how retailers, small businesses, and others are just not. There's some fundamental incapacity to really mirror those expectations in the user experiences. And I'm not. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, well, I was going to say, at Buzzboard we run a bunch of data. Some of this is in a new white paper Greg and I have authored that we'll give you the link to later. But in markets where, in places where the consumer is so far advanced, we're finding markets where businesses, 50% of the businesses who have a website don't have a mobile experience for those consumers, or they don't have a responsive experience. So the lagging is really going to, I think what's going to happen is, as we move into 2.16, those businesses that don't have a progressive, call it, digital experience are going to be punished by the consumers because they just won't have the patience. I think consumers have had patience for a little while, but I think they're running out of patience. That's my sense.
Well, what's interesting to me is that, well, I mean, there's all the data about, if your site is not fast enough or usable on a mobile device, people will click away or go to a competitor. What's interesting to me is that some of the some of the biggest and most sophisticated brands, household names, are like, giant, like, since we're in Star Wars week, everybody remember back, I think, to The Empire Strikes Back, where you had those Imperial walkers in the snow at the opening sequence. Do you remember that? Was that it? I think it was Empire Strikes Back. And these much smaller ships were able to go around and bring those huge elephant-like machines to the ground because they were so lumbering and slow. And by analogy, I think that's what some of the brands are like. I mean, they're sort of mired in these old cultures. Organizationally, there's a lot of confusion, multiple divisions, people don't work together. And those kinds of organizational and cultural obstacles keep them from really focusing on the consumer and delivering a good experience. And I mean, I've had a lot of bad experiences with different, during holiday shopping, a lot of bad consumer experiences. And it just seems like they're really hard-pressed to do anything about it.
Two more. I mentioned the bank that we just did a refi through, and I mean, they have built this sort of, I don't know what they call it, it's like this, you can track where you are in that process, which can be a challenging process. But the instructions, the user experience was so weird and so convoluted that as hard as they're trying, it would have been better off to say, if they sent me paper every day to tell me where we were. Second thing is, we tried to order lunch. I'm down here in the Buzzboard offices in Atlanta, and we went to a local provider's site to order lunch, and it got hung up. I put in my request once, and then it got kicked out. So they're trying, but we're getting impatient as consumers. So we ended up walking out, and that business missed out on $40 of a delivery opportunity because their site didn't really work. So.
Okay.
I do think, if there's anything on that last slide, I think 2016 is the year that businesses that aren't staying with it are going to get punished.
You keep saying 2016.
2016. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. All right, no problem.
Okay,
so all right, so we people have stopped guessing about Neil's location. I'll go back to that real quickly. Where is Neil in the world? Guess for some cool Buzzboard and LSA swag. All right, so now back to the next slide. And please feel free to interject your questions and comments. So the conventional search UI, the search results page that has been sort of the dominant feature of a lot of people's internet experience until pretty recently, is dead, right? I mean, people have been talking about the death of 10 blue links for a long time, but desktop search has definitely peaked in terms of, I mean, there's sort of incremental growth here and there, fluctuation, but in terms of its sort of overall trajectory, it's peaked. Mobile is going to open up a big lead. To that, we also add in the Siri, Cortana, Alexa, Google Now experiences, voice assistants, voice UIs, hands-free search is going to become more prominent. And so we're really looking at fundamentally different experiences, connected cars. Neil, you spoke about Apple TV and other similar devices that have voice UIs.
I think that, you know, if we did a show of hands of 100 or so people on the webinar, and we said, raise your hand if you remember to use Siri all the time, I think very few of us would raise our hands because we're still not really trained. We still type in the boxes, even on our mobile device. I think when that experience happens in, you know, when we're sitting in our den watching TV and using Apple TV and we say we want to watch Homeland, and up comes Homeland, that voice assistant is going to really start to bleed back into our search experiences as you describe here. Maybe it's in the car when we tell our car to do something and it does those things. So I think there are these other use cases where we use voice to make something happen that will drive us back to a lot more search using voice assistants and devices and the hands-free piece.
Well, what's interesting is that there's a company which used to be called Expect Labs, based in San Francisco, now called MindMeld, that does, you know, sort of a Siri-in-the-box product for enterprises that does sort of a natural language kind of voice interface with some machine learning and on the back end. They did a survey about voice assistants and voice search, and what they found was that in the last 6 months, there's been a big uptick in the usage of it. And in the last 12 months, you know, 60% of their 1,800 U.S. adult smartphone owner survey respondents had just started using it in the last year, and 40% of the total had just started in the last 6 months. So we're definitely seeing a new kind of movement and acceleration. These things have been around for a while, and people are now just really starting to use them with some pretty profound implications over time for everybody.
And I'm guessing as the momentum builds, the experience gets even better because it does machine learn all of our stuff, right? So it's sort of more that happens delivers better results, which drives the momentum forward.
Well, one of the things that's pretty interesting, I don't have somebody has guessed correctly.
Yes,
someone has guessed the correct location. So there's still time for others to guess. So we'll reveal it at the end. But at least one person has guessed the correct. People are just like rattling off different cities around the world. But somebody has guessed correctly. So there's still more time for others to guess. But I don't have an Amazon Echo, although I keep flirting with buying one. And you know, Yelp results have been integrated into Echo, and so you can get local business listings read back to you. It's kind of comparable to the Siri experience or Cortana experience or Google, where you will have a business listing read back. But there is no screen on Amazon Echo, of course. So it's purely like a radio, you know, or auditory response.
Receiver and
Yeah. What's interesting is to think about how will advertising be factored in. So if you have what would otherwise be a list of results with, you know, an ad at the top, it'll have to be like a radio ad in that kind of context. If you don't have a screen, how do you get ads in there? It has to be, I mean, there's some interesting things to think about in terms of monetization and the business model. So, you know, that'll play out over time depending on the devices. I mean, cars will still have a screen probably. Our phones have a screen, tablets have a screen, TVs have a screen, but there'll be other situations where there isn't necessarily a screen where we're getting content or information.
Well, and I think to your point, Greg, one more thing on this. I think as we start to ask using our voice, what we expect back may not be, we may not want text back. We might want video back. We might want a video something of 5 businesses. Instead of reading text on our screen, let's say we talk into Apple TV, we say we want a pizza place, we're going to have five little video shows that are maybe 5 seconds each or 10 seconds each that tell us which of the possible opportunities or providers we might want to choose. So I think the results coming back will also have to change as we move forward in this stuff.
Well, there's another assistant which I don't think is hit the market yet called Jibo that was crowdfunded, started by somebody at MIT, but it raised its money and it's trying to add personality into the sort of a virtual assistant category. So it's a little orb that swivels and has a sort of a pseudo eyeball and has a kind of cuter voice. And one of the things that they demo in the commercial for it is, order me Chinese food or something like that, where your favorites are stored and you can just execute a transaction verbally. So, I want to order pizza or something like that. And this was the principal sort of animating Bing as a challenge to Google, is that, Satya Nadella, before he was the CEO, was in charge of Bing, sort of the ultimate executive sort of responsible for Bing. And he used to talk about how people want to accomplish tasks. They want to, they're not looking for information per se. They're trying to do stuff. I mean, unless it's an education-related search or, news search. They're really trying to accomplish things, make the hotel or the plane reservation, order food, whatever it is, buy an article of clothing or something. And that search really needs to be far more transactional. And so now on this third bullet here, this is sort of what we're starting to see in mobile apps, the Ubers, the integration of, of OpenTable, Eat24, all the delivery services. We're starting to see, this is what people refer to as on-demand services, much more transactional activity getting into, search or versions of search, especially in a local context. People don't want links, they want actions. I was talking to somebody, the guy who started this mobile search engine, Relsi, which just launched, which is an app, and his mantra is apps and actions. People don't want links on the mobile web; they want apps and actions. Which brings us to the next prediction about local commerce and the growth of local commerce. So this top line is a kind of a modified prediction from Agendize, and their position was, without engagement tools on these in a web presence, it's sort of worthless. In other words, if you just have sort of static information, you're going to be SOL. You're going to be not, consumers are not going to be interested in you. That really people want booking, they want payments, they want the ability to interact in real time with businesses, and that this is part of this rising set of consumer expectations that we talked about driven by mobile.
And I think it's two-sided, Greg. I think it's sort of the pre-sale, and that's sort of when you want to make an appointment, right? You haven't actually consummated a transaction or gone to, a shrink or whatever online booking you did. But it's also the post-transaction period where these engagement tools are about retention. So it's a better experience before the transaction, and it's a better experience after the transaction that we're really talking about here. And I think businesses large and small are going to have to do that a lot better to stay competitive.
So we have a comment on the previous slide. So I'll go back to the previous slide, which says this.
And those.
Yeah, I'm trying to make sense of the question. It says there's some dependence here on a market niche. We serve 100 local small businesses, and of those, there are probably 2 where mobile. Oh, okay, I see it. So this person is disputing the idea that mobile traffic and mobile tools are going to be hugely important. They're saying that desktop remains the dominant source of traffic for these small businesses, and that they see that happening, that remaining true in 2016.
I think we could paint everything in here. It depends on the vertical. It depends on the mark. A lot of that. I think we're trying to describe where things are headed more broadly than individual specific verticals. But I do continue to believe that these voice assistants, mobile device search will continue to accelerate as the learning platform behind those gets better and the results get better. I think people still do desktop searches because either they're unfamiliar with how to do a voice search or something on their device, or the results aren't quite as compelling as what they'd get on a desktop search. But I think all that is going to change. So I wouldn't disagree with whoever said that for certain niches, but I think the acceleration continues to go the other way.
Well, I would throw in also the idea of demographics too. I mean, and depending upon the age group that the business is serving, I mean, we're going to see different behaviors. You know, millennials and so-called centennials or Generation Z, as some people are saying, are going to be much more mobile-oriented than, boomers and Gen Xers and so on. Somebody also threw in a question about how voice interfaces might impact co-op and the ability of national brands to provide support for local dealers who are moving to mobile. I would say the voice UI stuff where there's no screen at all is still going to be the minority use case, the Amazon Echo. We're going to see lots of voice input and still a sort of a screen output, although in some cases where there's an answer, we'll hear it read to us. What's the weather in New York today? And then you'll hear the weather in New York is 53 degrees, and you may see a screen. But I think screens are still going to be prominent, so I don't think there's going to be a major impact on advertising. But Neil, do you have any thoughts about that? How voice UIs and voice playback will impact sort of co-op and the ability of brands to support local dealers?
I think brands have the potential to deliver back a better experience result. I mean, I could get a list. I could get videos of 5 different businesses. I mean, I think there are a lot of ways that the results, the input is changing to voice. What's the output or what's the result going to be? And I think there's still a long way to go in the results side of all this stuff.
Okay.
And I think it can be a better user experience. What that means for brands and local businesses is who delivers, who's got a better way to position or what better creative they have in delivering back those results, and on what platforms do those results get delivered? Because I think there's a long way to go in making those more interesting.
Okay, so let's we didn't talk about the real-time engagement tools, but I think that some folks will embrace those and others won't. I mean, one of the things that's interesting, just to sort of add a little comment quickly, there is Facebook is really trying to build out Messenger as a business platform, right? So I'm talking about Star Wars again. I'm not that much of a fanboy, but I'm a fan. So I ordered this I Am Your Father T-shirt, which is, of course, a reference to the Empire Strikes Back, again, Darth Vader's comment to Luke Skywalker. And I did it to really terrorize my older daughter. But I ordered this shirt from Zulily like a month ago. But nonetheless, they just told me through Facebook that the shirt was on its way. And so I was able to roast them in Facebook Messenger. Why is it taking you so long? What bad customer service, blah, blah, blah. But we had this whole dialogue, much in the same way that you would on Twitter. And I just thought that was interesting. That's the first time I'd experienced it. But this is a notion of a sort of a real-time kind of an engagement tool, but in this case through Facebook Messenger. All right.
So there's some more questions here around voice interface.
Oh, there. Okay.
Continue to proliferate.
Okay, go ahead.
Call centers. Additionally, pretty much the only way to interface with wearables due to size. I guess this is not so much a question as a statement.
Well, let's read it again because everybody can't see it. So you and I can see it, but everybody can't. So
voice interfaces continue to proliferate in call centers because of the better cost handling versus operators. So that makes sense because we're moving people out of the equation and voice interfaces to do some of that stuff, or the amount of time people are involved. Additionally, voice interfaces is pretty much the only way to interface with wearables due to size. So that's talking into your phone, the Dick Tracy model. I think that's as much a statement as,
Yeah, those are two statements. I totally agree with wearables. We didn't mention wearables. That's another great example. absolutely. Wearables is another. That may be, in fact, I said the sort of non-screen use cases are going to be marginal. In fact, that may not be true with wearables. I mean, this is a good point. Wearables may be even though there's a screen, it's a tiny screen, that may be the place where some sort of alternative kind of experience really takes hold and becomes mainstream with a voice input and then some sort of alternative output or voice output, even though there's a tiny screen. Now, in terms of the call center point, IVR or sort of natural language, it's interesting. So the virtual assistant idea has had a life in the call center for sure for a while. And, to the extent that it gets smarter and better able to understand people and better able to do, a good job of addressing people's questions, then I think that I agree. But so far they've been pretty disappointing, and people are pretty frustrated with these non-human sort of machine interactions that they have. According to the survey data, there may be some outstanding examples where people are having good experiences. But for the most part, they really haven't cracked the code on that.
Well,
it should get better, though.
We were writing at the Kelsey Group years ago, well before BIA Kelsey, but the Kelsey Group, we were writing about the concierge and the phone, how the phone companies could go into that concierge service for a long time. And I think, I don't think those business models, except maybe at the very high end, ever really scaled in any way. I think that, we're past that, and we're going to let technology do it, and it's going to be a virtual concierge instead of a live person concierge down the road.
Well, what's interesting is that Elon Musk and others are very concerned about artificial intelligence. We're getting sort of beyond 2016 now, but there's an initiative to sort of keep artificial intelligence from turning into the Terminator and Skynet and taking over. So I think 5 years from now, 10 years from now, we're going to be in a very different situation in terms of artificial intelligence, machine learning, these interfaces, and people really will be having these Star Trek experiences. Computer, tell me X, Y, Z, or execute this task for me with pretty good results, I think. So. Let's do this one and then move on quickly. Native advertising. So everybody knows what native advertising is, but if you don't, it's essentially in-stream or contextual advertising that exists within the flow of content. The Facebook news feed, the Yahoo homepage, Twitter. There are other examples, but the notion here that was promoted is that ad blocking, which is much more kind of an idea than it is a reality for the mainstream. You have different people saying, oh, ad blocking has cost X billion dollars in ad impressions, but it's still a fairly marginal phenomenon, but nonetheless indicative of something profound in the industry. People saying that's going to drive a lot of native adoption, and other kinds of ads will sort of fall by the wayside or be less significant. And native can include video as well as sort of display.
Greg, I have a bit of a contrarian view on this stuff, because I think, personally, I'd rather know an ad as an ad instead of clicking on something that I thought might be content but is in fact an ad. And I think there are people who are going to find this stuff, unless it's done really well and there's really good value in that content that happens to be pitched as an ad, that people are going to reject this just like or maybe even more so than traditional ads, because it's an ad in what's the term, something in a silk clothing, or it's fake, and I think that's a really dangerous thing unless it's done really well.
Well, I think there are a lot of people who agree that native ads are deceptive. There's dispute about that. It used to be called advertorial. In a sort of a traditional media context. I think that native ads can be done well if they are truly consistent with the content or related to the content. AdSense was a contextual advertising in the beginning. I have a comment here from Greg Stewart who says that in 5 years Elon Musk Elon Musk is going to replace President Trump in the next election cycle. Okay, well that's a little bit far advanced of our prediction. So I'm going to go back real quickly to the picture of Neil. We've got one person who got it right, and there's still an opportunity to win fabulous Buzzboard and LSA swag, featuring the giant LSA coffee mug, which I don't have a picture of, but it is big, trust me. And Buzzboard.
A lovely moleskin, bright green Buzzboard moleskin book.
Will you promise to throw in some of those Buzzboard glass cleaners? Do you have some of those glass cleaners?
Yes, and we have some pens that have the back end as styluses too. So.
Okay, great.
Perfect.
So where in the world is Neil Polachek in this picture? Where is he? What place? Okay.
All right.
If you guess, you get the swag. We have one winner, and there's room for others. Okay, so we're about midway through here. Moving on, email and social. We're moving into some small business issues now.
I read this one, Greg. Email remains primary marketing focus of SMBs. And I do wonder if that's simply a function of ease of use and essentially low cost to do it. And is it really their primary marketing focus because of that, or because it really delivers results? And I'd love if somebody out there, one of our attendees, could answer that question.
So the question is, is it just inertia that keeps small businesses using email, or is it really effective? I mean, I think the answer is both. That would be my opinion.
It's very inexpensive to execute and relatively easy to execute, right?
Although I can tell you, in my particular case, I'm on this receiving end of so much email. I would say about 75% of the email I get, I delete without reading. I'm increasingly deleting email. Delete, 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 delete.
Well, that's my very point, is that it's the primary marketing focus, and Kelsey data says the same thing. But is it really that because it's because of ease of use, because perceived cost, or because of actual results? And
all of the above. All of the above.
Well, yeah, but you just said it's not because of actual results, because you just click, 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 and delete them all.
Well, that's anecdotal, but there's plenty of evidence that email can be quite effective. It is quite effective. I mean, it's sort of not as sexy as other forms of marketing, social media or mobile, but it has staying power because it does deliver results when done. Execution is the question, right? When it's done well, and this gets back to personalization to some degree. When it's done well, so here's a good comment. When it's done well, it can be quite effective, but not everybody does it well. So Brian Kraft of Market Hardware says, it's the simplest DIY marketing with the highest amount of retention, in this case, I guess, results, positive results. Retention
Brian means results or retention of remembering that
audience.
Yeah.
Or retention. Brian clarified. Do you mean by retention memory of the marketing message, or audience retention, as in not unsubscribing?
Let's go back, Greg. You see the other comment there about native? If you just
recurring customers. So Brian says recurring customers. Okay. So customer retention. So there's a comment about native, which is. Do you want to read it, Neil, or do you want me to read it?
Well, it's the difference between native advertising and custom publishing, and we do see a lot of custom publishing. I read Politico a lot for whatever, because I'm sick or whatever. Have nothing else to do. I don't know why I read it so much, but
that's quite a testimonial for Politico. I read it because I'm sick.
But they do have what I think are called custom publishing stories in there. I don't click on those as often as I click on their sort of organic reporting, but I see a lot of them in there, and that's a big revenue model for a lot of the publishing companies today is, custom publishing. So I think that's
custom publishing has been around for a long time, and maybe there is a distinction, but maybe there's a practical sort of overlap. One thing that's pretty interesting. I was at the Facebook media party last night in San Francisco, And I was talking to a number of people there about Oculus Rift, the virtual reality platform that they acquired. And, what's interesting is there's an analogy between some of the VR experiences, like the New York Times just put out, I don't know if people on the call got this, but the Google Cardboard glasses that you plug your smartphone into, and you download an app that gives you these virtual reality experiences, which are pretty cool. There's a number of commercial interests, like the Mini Cooper, BMW, and some others, in addition to just pure sort of entertainment or editorial that got involved with that. And that's not exactly custom publishing, but it sort of is. There's a sort of analogy there, and those experiences are pretty engaging. I mean, the problem is that these custom publishing experiences or native ads are they're done in sort of a perfunctory way, or they're not particularly engaging. I mean, I think, the cliche about searches or some of the other sort of similar directional media, the yellow pages in the old days, and still today, but not to the same degree, is that this is content. This is people have a high intent to purchase something. They want this information, so it's really about their intent. So the same content, put it in a context where it's desirable, produces action, produces positive outcomes for advertising.
And engagement. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So social media. Here's I don't remember. All these things have blurred together in my mind, so I don't remember if this is my comment or somebody else's comment. I was going to make a joke about stealing other people's ideas, but I'm not trying to do that here. I just don't have the attribution here. But LSA is actually going to publish all these with attribution later on in their original verbatim form. So social media becomes the #1 marketing platform for small businesses, arguably after email, but maybe even beyond email. What do you think about that? And what does the audience think about that? This is 2016.
I think it probably won't go in front of email. Email is, unless you're buying lists, is still, if you have your own list, it's relatively inexpensive. And as Brian said, it is the simplest do-it-yourself marketing they can do. I think, is the marketing platform on Facebook sufficiently easy? What's the perceived cost and the perceived benefit? I think that will keep email marketing probably in the #1 position, but I suspect that Facebook will become pretty close to second place.
Well, so let me put you on the spot, Neil, and handicap that. And anybody who wants to comment on this in the audience can do that. Facebook makes it. I mean, we have some DIY discussion later, and there's been some references to DIY with email. So in 2016, Facebook cracks the code on self-service advertising. I mean, their concept is pretty intuitive. You pick your audience and its characteristics and location. But let's say they create something really simple. That in 2016 they're going to create something so simple that they're going to see a flood of DIY advertising. Do you agree or disagree with that?
I think we're going to talk about this later. My view is we're going to see merchants start to find ways to buy it myself, but have somebody fulfill it. And we get into this self-service or do-it-yourself. I don't think merchants really want to run a campaign. I don't think merchants really want to figure out what audience they should buy and how to evaluate the performance of that. I think that's what they want either a large publisher to do through their sales reps or an agency, small agencies to do, or what have you. I think what they are going to be willing to do, and I think Amazon and other buying platforms out there are starting to train people to do, is buy what they want to buy. I'll buy this, and let somebody fulfill against that. So I think there's a big distinction. I think Dick Larkin strongly disagrees that Facebook is more important than paid search for SMBs. And I think Dick's view of that is probably that it's hard to figure out attribution and linkage.
ROI.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
That's right. Well, so Facebook introduced a local insights tool which sort of starts to get at that, where they're measuring foot traffic near people's physical stores. There's another interesting comment that ties email and social media together, which is from Joseph Scott. It says, the use of email to move people to social media platforms will increase in 2016. Uploading email lists to drive recommended likes or the custom audiences product where you can find your users or lookalike audiences on Facebook, but that's still complicated for ordinary businesses. Greg Stewart is saying small businesses will use agents. They're sold advertising. They do not like to buy advertising and handle fulfillment. Comment on that.
I totally agree with the second point. They don't want to handle fulfillment. I think we're going to see, maybe not in the next 12 months, maybe not 24, but in the next 36 months, platforms that allow merchants to buy advertising. That's but not fulfill it. Because I think the channels today that sell are doing a pretty inadequate job of actually adding value to that experience. So why should I buy from the rep if I can buy online?
All right, and we'll get a little bit more into that in a second.
Do we skip over the? There we go.
Yeah, we're back. So let's move through these next ones a little bit quicker. So Facebook introduces a true local search product, which they have done. If you go to facebook.com/services, the experience is not great, but it is local search, something they've been flirting with for a while. You get to see a list. You can do category searches in geographies and see a list of businesses with reviews, and it's pretty interesting. They certainly can do a much better job of it, and it may be the beginning of something quite powerful. The two other comments here are they promote themselves in that capacity, and they do more on the B2B side to make themselves effectively into a CRM platform, which they're starting to do to some degree with Pages, with messaging to customers, and then also Messenger, which they're trialing.
Yeah, I think the first one has happened. The second one, though, why would they build it unless they were going to promote it? The third one, they might build one. I'm not sure how many merchants would pursue that as their preferred CRM platform, because it might feel as though it's Facebook centric, and therefore it doesn't allow me to do other stuff outside of that Facebook world. I would think that merchants would want some CRM platform that is kind of agnostic, so to speak.
Okay, comment from Dick Larkin before we move on to the next one.
Well, Dick
says,
go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No, you read it.
For a local restaurant, would they be hurt more if they had to give up Yelp or Facebook? I personally use Yelp more for restaurants, but I think if you go to what they've done in their local search product, it's basically Yelp-like. It's got likes. It's it's clearly a competition to the other platforms out there, and perhaps more broadly, I think to Dick's point, Yelp has been extraordinarily good for restaurants, and some of the nightlife stuff, but in all fairness, Yelp has not moved significantly beyond that, though they might disagree, in terms of how often people go there to look for a plumber or what have you. So I think Facebook's opportunity is more broad, frankly.
I think right now Yelp is comfortable. This is in no way a Yelp killer, but I think over time there's great potential, and I would disagree a little bit. I think there's broad usage of Yelp for categories beyond restaurants. I think that's what their data show. I recently found a plumber on Yelp. But segueing into the next slide, I also use Nextdoor to look for plumbers, which is very interesting. They just started asking for local business recommendations. They're soliciting them from people. They're taking the content in discussions and turning it into a list of businesses, of recommended businesses. So they've done some semantic or other analysis, and they're creating a local directory of businesses based on neighbor recommendations, which is pretty interesting. It only exists in a couple of cities right now. But what do you think about Nextdoor as a new marketing platform for small businesses?
I think it's great because of the neighborhood context. It puts that local stuff in context. It has the feed from my neighbors and from people looking for their cats, which I think gives it an authenticity that the others struggle to deliver. I think that's the real interesting thing about Nextdoor is that authenticity that I think really may make a big difference. I think Brian Kraft wanted to go back to that self-fulfillment, do-it-yourself.
Yeah, let's not read Brian's thing right now, because let's come back to this, because we do have to have this. Yeah, let's come back to it. So the next two slides are tied together. So I'll go through this one and then land on the second one. So the idea here is about attribution and performance metrics, and the notion is that marketers want quality and not just raw data or quantity and analytics. People are increasingly looking for real insights and not data that are confusing and that they have to interpret, which begs the question of who's doing the interpreting. But nonetheless, I think also we're going to see these proxy metrics, these abstract metrics that we've seen throughout the life of the Internet: impressions, clicks, click-throughs, to some degree engagement. Some of these old style metrics give way to other things that are much more tangible and concrete, reflecting actual customer activity and value. Of course, if you're an e-commerce company, you can always optimize against sales, but most businesses, of course, do not. E-commerce is a minority use case, and related to this previous point, we're gonna see in-store visits make their way into the ROI calculation, make their way into optimization of campaigns that's starting to be done, location-based optimization. This is from David Shim of Placed. He thinks that marketers will increasingly be optimizing ad creative or media against store visits. And then there's a term that I was talking to Uber Media, which is a company that is tracking online to offline and doing ad buys and optimizing. And we had this. We came up with this term, location ROI or LROI, so that this becomes now a new metric that brands and small businesses want to understand. And the Facebook Local Insights product is, it's a weird product because it doesn't show you people who visited your store. It shows you people who are near your store, but it still starts to make the connection between online and offline advertising and nearby customers. What do you think about this movement toward sort of better, more real information, quality, not quantity?
This is like everybody said, oh, merchants want calls, they don't want clicks. And it's all what you do with these things. If I have bad personnel on my floor in my retail store, you can send me 100 visitors, and if I, as the merchant, don't put in place the right people to convert those people, these driving store visits is meaningless. So technology is not going to fix that. And so it's really important that if this is the way things go, that merchants and businesses recognize that really closing the loop around that is what's the experience that's delivered on site. And to just drive store visits without, educating the merchant or the business that now I'm going to drive them into your store and you're going to pay me for that, but you guys have to, put a quality experience in place to convert that is really important. And that's often overlooked in this stuff.
I think your point is an ultimate point and really a valuable point. But I would say I think we are definitely seeing it at the enterprise level and at the small business level, although most small businesses don't know to ask for this. We're seeing an interest in these tangible metrics, and I should have mentioned calls. Calls, I think, is one of the successor or surviving metrics. But I think this, putting aside the e-commerce question, because I think clicks and e-commerce conversions still matter in a search context, but otherwise, I think store visits, offline actions, in-store sales, calls, these become the new metrics, the successor metrics that people start to optimize against. And from a small business perspective, I think, I would rather know how many people were driven into my store, even though I may not convert these people, versus how many clicks I got. I mean, that's just a much more comprehensible metric than you got, 5 billion impressions and 3 clicks. I mean, people who don't go to...
But you've got to convert those people too.
Okay, so on this slide about experience, absolutely, and people have historically blamed Google for lack of conversions when you go from Google a search result to a crappy, I almost said an expletive, a crappy landing page,
They used to
and
blame,
then they blame
blame
Google
the
for that,
call
but it's their
company
fault.
for not converting
Yeah,
calls when they had
right.
lousy
And,
people answering the calls or
right.
a
And
recording. You
well,
know,
and this is the very interesting thing about call tracking, right? There's a lot of call recording going on in call tracking, and what you see, I think, is the delivery of a call from the marketing platform, and then the bad phone handling, long hold times, infuriating IVR, et cetera. You see bad operational practices or business practices that screw up the conversion. And this is the beauty of call recording, is that those things can be unearthed. And call recording has been done to monitor agents forever, but in these sort of, we've got a keyword that resulted in a call, and then the agent screwed it up, or there was too long hold time. I mean, I think that's great data that we're starting to, get in these kinds of call tracking, call recording situations.
What's here around beacons to store visits, right? I send somebody into a store. I have a marketing platform. I deliver a person into a store, right? And I think that coupled with the beacons and somebody standing in front of a display and nobody on the floor helping them out, showing them a product, right? I think that's how this stuff all gets connected. So that the beacons are part of delivering that better store experience, because I can know, oh, Neil stood at that display, but he didn't stand at that display, and he picked up a product from that display. Now we have some ways of understanding that behavior once in the store. So I think they're actually very closely tied together.
I think that these ultimate scenarios that you alluded to that are really sophisticated are hard to execute. I think we're still in the baby steps, time with beacons and other indoor location stuff. But I think one of the things that's interesting is the idea that beacons will be deployed in small business locations, franchise locations. Yext is starting to do this, as a way to welcome people, or as a way to just like a digital door counter. I mean, you can do this in different ways. An automatic loyalty thing. I mean, beacons, have their issues and limitations, but there are some simple use cases that are pretty powerful. There's a loyalty platform, Belly, which many people on the call know. And what's interesting is that Belly has these iPads, basically point of sale kind of iPads, in I think 10,000 locations, and those are all effectively beacons.
How about sending more people onto the floor to help the customers?
Yes. Well, but humans cost money. Customer service is a great thing, and it's the missing piece in a lot of these scenarios. But people are always trying to avoid bringing on additional because they're costly. They should just do a better job of sales training existing people, because there's so many indifferent salespeople. Now
totally
I'm going to my
slide, Greg. We're seeing it in spades over here at Buzzboard. Our customers are really turning to our what we call micro-segmentation, and using that with their marketing automation platforms to do exactly what you've listed there. Drive more effective acquisition.
One of the sessions we're going to have at LSA 16 in March in San Francisco is about data-driven selling, and how this point that you make about how data are now being integrated into the sales process in more sophisticated ways to do what amounts to a kind of a customized presentation for that business. A much more sophisticated and customized presentation.
And I think it's mining the ahas out of the data and then translating those ahas into messages that resonate with whoever you're selling to. That's going to be the real magic sauce.
That's back to the point about real insights and not just data, right? Sort of translating that data into something. Right. Okay, so this is our final slide, believe it or not. I know you guys thought this was just going to go on and on and on, but this is our final slide for today. There were a bazillion more predictions, some of them very specific about kind of rich snippets and schema as a ranking signal and stuff like that I didn't include. And some of this is Neil and me, and some of this is other people. So we sort of threw it all into the sausage grinder, and it came out hopefully in this sort of interesting way. But this is the final slide in our hour of predictions, and it's related to this question. So Brian Kraft now comes back into the discussion. So here's the point. I think this, Neil, was your point. We did a think tank gathering in LA. Some people on the call might have been there, where we talked about this issue of the high cost of sales and low margins and high churn is causing what amounts to the abandonment of the lower end of the market. So it could be the bottom third, the bottom fourth, or maybe even, you know, slightly greater than a third. They're being abandoned because it's just too expensive to acquire and retain these people. The account sizes are not big enough. And then Brian is saying that there's a strict kind of spending hierarchy between do it for me and do it yourself. He's saying that under $200 a month is a DIY price point, 400 to 4,000 is a do it for me, and 4,000 plus goes back to DIY in an ironic sort of way because it's all in-house and there's a director of marketing and maybe some in-house people who are doing you know, SEO and other kinds of marketing channels. So any comments, Neil, on this sort of initial point about the bottom?
Yeah, I think the language for 2016 is not do it for me, do it. I think it's around I will buy it and you fulfill it. I think instead of calling it self-service, because we know most of these people aren't going to build these things, maybe at the very low end they will, but it's really about, you know, the distinction between I'm going to buy it here and you guys are going to fulfill it. I don't need a salesperson to tell me what to buy anymore. There's plenty of data. It can map my buying experience. Let me buy it and let you fulfill it. And take the money that you would spend sending a rep to see me and put it on the service and the fulfillment of that. I'd much rather give $1,000 to spend on fulfillment and servicing than $1,000 to spend half of it on a sales rep to come bother my office who isn't informed, shows up unprepared, and then, you know, I'd rather have you, you know, literally I'd give you $1,000 to just go fulfill it and I get better ROI. That's my point.
So then to the second point, how do you sell those people? I mean, how do you create awareness in those people or get those people to do the self-service sign up?
Marketing automation.
What's the
demand generation?
What's the mechanism?
Demand generation. Put content out there that you know that is interesting, that brings them in, brings them to some platform that says, here, let's take a look at your business, walk you through this. You know, it's just like, you know, we're getting used to buying more and more stuff online. We don't fulfill those things. I buy my ticket from here back to San Francisco. I don't fly the airplane back, but I can buy it because I know what I want to buy. And I think there are going to be more and more ways to do that, because I would think, all of us think that we haven't moved the sales piece far enough ahead yet, as much as a lot of us try. So we're at 250.
So Dick, yeah, so we're almost done here. We're at the cusp of the end of this. So Dick Larkin is saying that he thinks that the numbers that are going to be relegated to DIY is even higher than a third of the market because the cost of making sales to this audience is so prohibitive. And you know, it's interesting. I was at the Yelp office yesterday, listening to a call with a particular advertiser, which will become the subject of a blog post somewhere down the line. And it was very interesting to hear the sales reps and their attempts to interact with the customer, and just the number of attempts that they tried to make to set up meetings, to set up appointments. This was all just purely on the phone. It was amazing. I mean, it's you know, I described it as like Vietnam. You know, it's just like they're slogging through the jungle with the virtual machete, trying to get these folks to pay attention and to answer the phone and to be in front of a computer. And that's fairly representative, I think, of the broader experience out there.
It is.
It's just really, really difficult and
really
costly.
tough.
And this is Dick's point. Yeah. So he's saying they can't or won't pay enough for full service if they're not in the top 40% of spenders. So he's saying essentially 60% of the market is kind of going to be jettisoned by these traditional sales channels or traditional sales models.
Well, and I say take the $1,000 and put it into the execution of the marketing and media campaign, and not put it, you know, it's going to shift to that, because that's
right.
what I want.
Right. So I'm going to have to scroll back through the slides to go back to the Neil picture. We're going to announce the location, and the winner is going to have to, like on the, I'm going to get 10 emails. Oh, I thought it was that place too. There was really only one correct answer that I saw, and that person is going to have to send me an email, which is Greg at thelsa.org, or you can send it to, two people guessed.
So we'll
Okay,
send
so
out,
two people have, so we have two packages,
Budapest.
two packages to send out. Yeah, so it's Budapest,
Budapest.
Yes.
As a Hungarian,
And,
I know it's called Budapest, even though there's a
yes,
T.
okay, Budapest to be politically correct. And send your email to Greg at thelsa.org or webinars at thelsa.org, or my other email address, greg.sterling@gmail.com, if you can't remember the LSA email. And Neil, do you want to give out your email or an email for folks if they want to talk to you?
Neil at Buzzboard or nbpolachek@gmail.
Okay.
And we thank you.
We want to thank you for showing up and being with us and engaging with us. I mean, this is really interesting stuff. These are difficult questions. We went beyond 2016 in some cases, but I think that this was an engaging discussion, certainly for me. Many of these issues will be carried over into our conference in March, and there'll be a lot more great stuff, LSA 16. If you're interested in participating as a speaker, send me a note. We're in the process of refining the agenda right now and reaching out to speakers.
And it's nice to see so many of you virtually. So thank you.
Yes,
for coming
and
today.
have
a great holiday.
Have a great holiday. Happy Hanukkah for those that celebrated. It's over. Merry Christmas for those who celebrate. It's upcoming. And Kwanzaa, Festivus, Winter Solstice. All these things. Have a great time. Get some rest. Don't check your email. And thanks, everybody.
See you in 2016. Bye-bye.